morning, everyone. Particularly good morning to everyone who's nice and prompt. We've just got, I can see a list of lots of people signing in. So we'll just give it a minute or two just while everyone signs in, and then we'll kick off in just a second.
It's been a while, hasn't it, Roger?
It's been a while.
Since we've done a sort of big webinar.
Have you missed it?
Say again?
Have you missed it?
I have missed it, yes.
Yeah, it's nice to be sharing again.
Morning, everyone, from Helen. Good to see you, Helen, or to see your message there. Yeah, I think our last one would have been, I hate to say now, but it's good to be back. Good to be back.
I wonder if it was Loyalty Day.
Well, Loyalty Day, yes, of course. Month after next.
Was that the last one?
No, I think we did some earlier in the year.
Did we?
But actually, you might be right. It might have been Loyalty Day. Hands up, who's here for Loyalty Day?
Well, we enjoyed it, didn't we, Richard?
We did. It was great, actually. We had it was truly international. We had participation from the USA, didn't we? And it was slightly difficult though because it coincided with Thanksgiving, and so our American contributors we needed to do it by recording because they were otherwise eating turkey, I believe.
I believe so. Shall we, rather than reminisce, shall we? Because we've got a lot to get through today, haven't we?
We do.
Shall we dive in? There are
still
people joining, but which is brilliant. But let's dive in. And hello, welcome everybody. We're really delighted at how many people have signed up and are joining us today. Brilliant to see so many interested in hearing what's going on. My name is Roger, if you don't know me, Roger Lawson, of About Loyalty. And About Loyalty exists really purely to help charities understand their audiences, and especially drivers of that emotional support and the emotional connection that people have with the charities, and then help them use that to engage, capture attention, and grow long-term loyalty and support with their supporters. I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleague Richard, and also Becky and Lottie. Becky from Shelter and Lottie from Scope. Guys, would you like to quickly say hello and introduce yourselves?
I'll go first then quickly. It's basically everything that Roger said, and we do these things together. Over to you, Lottie.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Lottie. I work for Scope. I'm the audience planner there. I'm delighted to be part of the webinar today.
And I'm Becky. I work in the individual giving team at Shelter. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys.
And we are, all of us, really excited to be sharing today, because understanding what's going on in the world is so critical for all of us as communicators. So every week we survey 2,000 people. It's a nationally representative sample online that gives us the purpose being to get really fast, totally up to date, if you like, sort of pulse of the nation, to really understand the people we're talking to and what's important in their lives. So every week, Richard gets a massive spreadsheet of data, and to be honest, blows me away, because he goes through this huge amount of data and draws out the really key insights, which we share with charities. So we're going to share some of those insights today, and there is nothing more gratifying when in our roles we share data and insights with charities than when we hear how they use it to make a difference. And so that's why I'm really, really excited to hear Becky and Lottie today also talking about how they've used that in what they do. So today we're going to cover three things. Richard will share the latest insights. These are literally this week's insights, so you'll see exactly what's happening today. Becky and Lottie from Shelter and Scope, you just met them, are going to talk about how they've used them and what difference it makes for them. And then we've got a bit of an offer for you, which we're going to make at the end for a free trial. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Richard.
Thank you, Roger. one thing as well, we're planning to have some time for questions at the end. So if you've got questions, scribble them down somewhere, and we'll come to them at the end and answer some of your questions. Otherwise, we might not get through everything we need to get through. So first of all, public sentiment. So there's loads of people out there, aren't there? Tens of millions of people, and actually different people care about different things: animal welfare, cancer, equality, social justice, kids' education, walking down the street, going on holiday, loads of things. There's people's lives are so busy, and actually we segment them, we put them into groups in lots of different ways. But it's important for us to understand what's going on for them, and of course, stuff that's going on in the outside world, changes in the outside world. It affects how people think, how they feel, and how they behave. And at the moment, and it continues, there's a lot of change, and it's still fairly dramatic and kind of turbulent, really, out there. So what do? We need to understand how we capture people's attention, different types of people's attention when there's so much going on. And in order to do that, we need to measure how people are feeling and track those changes, but in response to the stuff that's going on. And it's different types of people as well. We need to understand what the world feels like to them. So actually, what is it like to be some of these people? How can we cut through so that we can capture their attention and kind of sit alongside them and have a conversation? It's nothing worse, isn't there, when somebody approaches you with an opening conversation and it's just like not where you are. It becomes very, very difficult to kind of resonate and create that rapport and that connection. And when we're doing this through kind of remote communications, that is almost impossible. So this is absolutely vital in terms of just getting to the kind of the nub of where people's brains are, what they're thinking about. And of course, we then need to use the insights. We need to, essentially just sit alongside people who care about the issues your charity exists to address and talk to them in a way that they can understand and you can get cut through. It's very, very important. So public sentiment, one of the things we've learned is that public sentiment is influenced, and it's no surprise, is it? But it is influenced by what's out there in the media. And here's just a collection of headlines. These are the headlines actually that were live during the last week of research, just as a bit of backdrop. So there's a lot about jabs for teenagers, booster jabs for over 50s, reform of the social care, refugee crisis around Afghanistan. Those are some of the main headlines that have been coming through. So it's useful for us as well, just to kind of know what's on that those frontline sort of the front page headlines, and sort of use that as not necessarily drivers, but to understand which bits of those are resonating and which aren't. Because these things do influence people's focus and attention. I like to think of the insights that come out of the tracker as a bit like if you're eavesdropping over someone's morning conversation over the breakfast table, or if you're at work and water coolers, what are the things that people would be talking about? What's capturing their attention at the moment? Where are they focusing in their lives? What are they worried about? That then moves on to the issues of the day. So the news might move out. Might move out as figuratively it just did there, but what are the things that people are kind of focusing on? What are the issues out there that are of concern? What's bubbling to the surface, and maybe what's being pushed to the background? This is important in terms of understanding if we're going to have empathy with people and understand where they are. We're going to need to know what they care about. And then, of course, it's how people are feeling. Are they angry? Are they hopeful? Are they optimistic? Are they worried, scared? Again, it's important to know where people are on that spectrum if we're going to have sensible conversations, if we're going to get cut through with them. Because ultimately, of course, this then leads into how people behave, what they go on to do. And actually, this is at the heart of it, because we want to then, what we do is turn this around. We work out where people are on the outside, and then we identify those things that are going to influence charity support, really get to grips with actually what are the factors that are going to be most significant in terms of our understanding and our being able to have sensible conversations that resonate with people. That's kind of what the track is all about. And Roger's explained a bit about the mechanics. But today is much more about, I guess, the interesting stuff. What is actually happening? What are those? What will fill those question marks? What is going on? So the big five today. So it's a bit of a spoiler straight up front. I'm going to give you the answer first, and then going to go into a little bit of detail about where those have come from. So first thing, It is our health. People are worrying about their health, and COVID-19. It's not gone away, as we all know. May not be in the headlines, as you saw, but it's there, and it's a growing concern. Financial worries. Again, this is another one that's not in the headlines. It's buried deep, but it's bubbling up, and it is influencing people. And obviously, that's critical when we're thinking about how we engage with people, how we talk to them, what we ask them to do, how we ask them to help, and how we frame all of those asks. Very important. In terms of where people are, that well-being is very slowly deteriorating. So people are starting to struggle a little bit more, and it's important that we kind of get our minds around that. And altruism, it's kind of almost like the flip side of the well-being. When well-being comes down, altruism comes down with it a little bit. So people aren't feeling so much, let's say that community mindedness, that solidarity that we've seen before. But in terms of my relationship with charities, we've still got some strength there, some real and actually some recent positive shifts. So we're going to go through all of those in a little bit of detail. And then when we've gone through those, Becky and Lottie are going to talk through how they use the insights. And then to wrap up at the end, I'm just going to give a few recommendations on, it's actually just 4 things that charities can be doing now out of a list of 50 things you could, but we'll just pick just 4 that are really going to help land communications in a much more accurate way. So looking at the first one, COVID. This is taken straight from the government's website statistics. I'm sure most people know deaths are going up, hospitalizations are going up, and in fact cases, deaths and hospitalizations are all considerably ahead of this point last year. So it is a concern, and I think we've all seen, well, you may have seen summaries of the Prime Minister's and the sort of Health Secretary's announcements yesterday around steps to take towards autumn and winter to prevent any kind of escalation of this. But even before yesterday, so the research that we're presenting here was before yesterday's announcement, and even then we're starting to see this having a significant impact on people. So now I'm just going to give you a little bit of a health warning. The next slide is going to look horribly complicated, but I'm going to break it down for you and explain it step by step. So bear with me. Those people who love charts might love it straight away and get it straight away, but others might need a bit of explanation, and that's fine. I'm probably more in the latter than the former, but here we go. Whoa, look at that. So go take your eyes right down to the bottom left for that greyed out question. This is the question we ask. Here are different priorities people might have in their lives. Please indicate how much focus you're putting on each of these different areas right now. So we ask on a regular basis, how much people are prioritizing their hobbies, mental well-being, their community, job security, health, and lots of different areas. We track these over time. Now, if one of these points is over towards the right of the chart, that means it's a high priority in my life. So as we can see there, we've got your health, money, finances, mental well-being. They're all over to the right. That means that people are going, yep, those are really important for me at the moment. Over to the left, those are things that are lower priority. So we've got travel and holidays, career advancement, my community. So these are things that people aren't prioritizing in their lives at the moment. The things at the top of the chart are growing in priority. So these are things that are kind of getting increasingly more important. And the things at the bottom are things that are they're sort of less of a focus, and they're going down in terms of that priority. So just looking to the top left, things at the top, things move from left to right. So as things move above the line, they start to shift over towards the right. So my community, because it's starting to grow, will start to move up towards the right, towards hobbies and health, etc. And things below the line will drift towards the left as they kind of decrease in priority. So you've got this natural kind of cycling going around. And at the moment, we're seeing, quite astonishingly, and it's been for a couple of weeks now, your health, the highest increases in priority, and it is the highest priority. So we're seeing people worrying about health much more and increasing more than anything else as well. So it's a substantial kind of growth there. So that's a significant factor in terms of what people are focusing on at the moment. It is their health. But I think if you notice sort of the next, my parents appears in here. So that's that's growing positively. It's above average, and it is shifting up there as well, more than some of the others. But I'll come back to that one again a little bit later. So just taking this point, your health, we can then take this one single point and then break it down. So actually, who is most worried about their health? And that's what the next slide shows, which is also fairly detailed. But that point there was 62%, and there we see that average. That's where it stands at the moment. And this then breaks down by different sort of strata of people, different groups of people. Understands how different people, whether different groups of people are driving this over others. I've just got some examples here of age. I see socioeconomic grouping, engagement with charity, whether you've got children at home. We can put all sorts of things along the bottom here. We can put region and country. We can put whether you're affected by cancer, diabetes, disability, lots of different conditions along there. We can put by housing tenure. We can put a whole range of different segments there. So, and I think the key thing is, if your charity is working around segments that are defined in some way, we can probably map some of these filters against that. So you can start to then measure for your priority segments, which are worrying most about health. Is there a group of people who are kind of, we're looking at, who are supporting us, who perhaps are most focused on or worrying about their health. Over the population, it's those aged 45 to 54 that's so more than 12 percentage points ahead of average in terms of their concerns about health. And I think this extends, as I say, that's the group perhaps are worrying more about their parents as well, in that particular age group. I'll say there's a little bit more of that comes later. So that was health. In terms of financial worries, we also, again, cast your eyes down to that greyed out question. Take to indicate how you feel about each of the following at the moment. So each of the following includes things like, again, your work life, the economy, your health, and this asks people about their essentially how they're feeling. Are they completely fine, 100% fine, or are they completely terrified? This averages them all, and there's just to kind of orient you. This zero line here means that it's in the balance. So half are terrified, half are completely fine. And obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, this is kind of the extreme terror mark, and that was repeated again in January. As we moved to coming out of lockdown, that improved up until the point when the Delta variant was confirmed. And since then, with a few ups and downs, we've pretty much been on a fairly steady trend of in which life is slowly getting a little bit more scary. So from everyone being fine about everything, there's this slow deterioration in the background. So people, and it's one of those changes, it's that boiling a frog story, isn't it? It's a slow change. People might not notice it day to day, but it's there. It's this kind of creeping anxiety. I can't remember the word I used. We're going to make a band out of the name. Creeping, I can't remember. I'm looking to Roger here. He's not going to remind me. Anyway, so yes, there's this creeping anxiety where life is slowly.
I can't remember, but I remember it was in a Pink Floyd song, wasn't it? But
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Oh, it's gone now.
So it's this slow deterioration. You can see it. It's a marked shift, and as I say, it's slow. So people won't necessarily notice it day to day, but it's happening. So this final point here is the average of the various points. And so the next slide is another one of those scatter plots, and the average is there. There it is, the average. And these are all the different points that contribute to it. And so this again is, read this the same way as the other one. So stuff to the right, I'm completely fine about these things. Stuff to the left, I'm absolutely terrified. Things at the top, I'm getting more fine. And things at the bottom, I'm getting more terrified. So again, we'll have this. So the planet, bizarrely, actually, the planet. So 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, planet was big terror when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate, I can't remember the exact, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I think, isn't it, the IPCC? When their report came out, this was the big fear. And it was only a couple of weeks later that sustainability and charities like Greenpeace started to flag up on these trackers. But now, it's literally just been pushed aside, and I'll get on to by what in a moment. But this was the big thing, tipping the balance before. But it just shows how fickle people can be. Is that there's nothing improved about the planet, but something else has come along, and it's now pushed that out of the way. People are bizarrely feeling more fine about planets. In fact, more about that than anything else. In terms of getting more fine, admittedly, it's still way over to the left. So notice two things on this chart. On the right, it'd be great actually to do this as a what can you see? But all of the things on the right start with the word your. So this stuff, the things that people feel most fine about are the things that they have control over. It's the stuff in their lives. As we move to the left, it's these things that are a bit further away that are a little bit more terrifying, or considerably more terrifying. But in particular, again, this is a bit like health in the previous one. This is almost the fastest growing terror. But it's very, very far over to the left in terms of absolutely terrified. Notice as well, but your work life here is, people are concerned about this. And I think this doesn't necessarily relate to, am I going to lose my job? Because we're seeing a slow decline in people's fear of redundancy. But I think it's much more about expectations of returning to the office and what that means for my life and my lifestyle. But over and above everything else, it's the economy of the UK here, and we'll see other things here, later as well that kind of reinforce these this undercurrent of concern about money. So I've just broken it down again, and this is about finances. Again, it's those 45 to 54 who are most concerned, who are most terrified, in fact, about the finances. So this is they're a sensitive group at the moment, it feels. Some positive news in that our regular givers and cash donors are above average in there, but we've still got, 10% of regular givers are absolutely terrified about their finances. So about the economy of the UK. We've got finances coming up next. So this question here says, look, how much do you agree with the statement? I'm worried that I won't have enough money for the basics in the coming year. So we like to drill down into some of these areas. How I'm worried I won't have enough money for the basics in the coming year, e.g. home, heating, food. And that's pretty drastic. And those who agree are in the orange at the top here. Now, the last 4 weeks, those that agree have grown from about just under 30%, just over 35%. So that's not an insignificant shift. And I think the big story here is that actually, 1 in 3, more than 1 in 3, I've said nearly 1 in 3, but actually it's more than 1 in 3, agree they're worried to some extent they won't be able to afford the basics in the coming year. It is a concern, and we can see again that these financial concerns are starting to creep in, and we know what that will mean. It will mean that as we kind of move forward and these maybe bite, creeping malaise, and as these things bite, it will impact some charity supporters and some charity support. I've got some charts that show that later. So this is the same question, and it's just looking at the last kind of looking at this last week's results by various sets of the population. Young adults, in fact, it correlates very strongly with age, sort of agreement with this statement. So the younger you are, the more likely you are to agree with it, which does provide some, again, if we're looking at regular givers, cash donors, actually that's, there's fairly strong disagreement with that. But we've still got, look at this, 10% of regular givers agree strongly that they are worried they won't be able to afford the basics in the coming year. So there's a group of supporters who are worrying about affordability. And last week we saw a massive increase in the proportion of people who are saying, I'm going to review my non-essential expenditure. On the top here. So right, so that's financial worries. They're there, and they're impactful. So well-being, a lot of detail on here. So this is 4 indicators we track. The top 2, well, you can read what they are, but the top 2 all relate to the sense of being trapped, being lonely, being isolated, having my connection, my relatedness suppressed. So being unable to go and meet people, being unable to go out and connect with other human beings, being trapped in my own home, those kinds of feelings. The bottom left one is that sense of actually I'm not in control of my life. I don't have agency. I'm not capable and competent. I've got things being taken away from me. That's very much in the present. And the bottom right one around future opportunities is very similar about life being out of control, but it's really about looking forward to being out of control. So we've got some things here that closely connect to self-determination, which is sort of that relatedness, connection, control, and capability. And actually, we're seeing in a lot of these, and again, it's since that May point, isn't it, when the Delta virus was confirmed, it's starting to creep back. And it's that, yeah, as we said, that creeping malaise, as we described it, is continuing. And it's that kind of life's getting difficult, and people won't be necessarily, as I say, they won't necessarily be noticing it from day to day, but it is starting to creep in a little bit more quickly. Particularly, it's like kind of feeling trapped, not in control, those senses. And I expect as we go through to autumn and winter, we might start to see that getting a bit stronger. And then the question, of course, is, well, what do we do about that? Which we will come to at the end. Here's another one. And, you know, agreement to the right, disagreement to the left, growing in agreement above and declining in agreement below. And all of these that I've circled on the left. So I feel trapped, life makes me feel like life is on edge, where I don't have enough money for the basics, feel lonely and isolated. I like life before. There's a lot looking back here, and they're kind of creeping in the background, and these are going to be heading up towards the right in terms of where these are. There's potentially, this is where these are likely to end up, but it is a kind of a difficult feeling that's creeping in. And I think what's headlining it here is this dreading, looking forwards, the thought of another long hard winter, which we know, but it's strong, and it's strong in terms of its growth in agreement. Over the right here, prices have crept up recently. It's that kind of, again, it's the finances that are coming through. Also, in terms of well-being, we've from the very start we've said, look, how long do you think life is going to? I'm paraphrasing. Well, the exact question is, how long do you think there will be active cases of COVID-19, and people need to make significant changes to their daily lives? So it's really looking at, can we get back to normal? And this week I was just astonished. It's leapt, the weighted average is leapt up again, and we're now, people are expecting it on average to last into the middle of March 2023. That's another 18 months. So this is kind of one of the significant factors that's influencing that creeping malaise, that kind of that sort of increase of terror, if you like. It's one of the factors that's coming through. And yeah, so I keep expecting this to come down, but actually that's a really important indicator where people are saying, do you know what, it's going to be impacting me negatively for some time. And the other way we look at this is through looking at net optimism. So the question is, how optimistic are you feeling about life in general? And the pre-pandemic average was 44%. And those of you who've seen us before will hopefully know this. So there is that dotted orange line. 2020, it was very low. It was, look at here, in October last year it almost was, as many people pessimistic as there were optimistic. But it maxed out around sort of early to mid 20s. At the moment, we seem to be leveling off at around 33%, which is, again, it's like, or are we on a slow decline since May? And it's a difficult one to call at the moment. But either way, we've still got this like 10 percentage point gap between where we used to be and where we are now. And that again contributes to that sense of things aren't quite well at the moment, and I'm struggling a little bit. And we're seeing that across a number of the indicators. It's where your supporters are. And what does that mean? Again, this is another one of these charts, which is around looking to the future. How much do you disagree with these statements? And over here on the right, we've got life is tough at the moment. It's important to support one another. Now, people are expressing a need for support. It's the fastest growing, and it's one of the biggest. I think it might be the one that has the strongest agreement. And in fact, this is less about I want to support other people, and it's much more about actually I need the support. I think what's also interesting is down at the bottom left, we have seen these, I can't help treating myself, I want to splash out and buy new things, that kind of retail therapy angle. We'd seen that quite high before, but those have been kind of pushed to the side, which is, again, my well-being's low, and even spending money on it I can't do now because I'm worrying about money. That's kind of in there. And we've also then got this same indicator, life is tough at the moment. Here you see how much that's grown. So that's over time, that's grown a lot. And all of our other community indicators have really stayed level through this period. Lots of detail in here, but the big picture story is that we had some solidarity at the beginning of the pandemic. It's kind of gone. People aren't doing that, reaching out to their communities before, but they are calling out for help themselves. So this is kind of, in terms of altruism and empathy, it's kind of saying, I don't not care about people out there, but I'm more of a priority at the moment. Support from me is more important at the moment. Good news for altruism. Trust in charities has gone up, and it's gone up solidly for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And it's now up there with the NHS, your local GP, and our classic, the supermarkets. If you read Roger's blog, you'll know all about the importance of supermarkets. Trust in charities is really high, and it's been growing and it's strong. So there's an opportunity here, and there's definitely we'll come on to that in recommendations. In terms of altruism, where are people looking? Looking after elderly people. So if we go back to our 45 to 54 group, that'll be their parents. We saw parents before. This is relating some of the issues to people's own lives. And actually down at the bottom left, a lot of the social justice issues are less important and declining importance. So again, this is more about me and those closest to me and the things in my life, and less about others out there, in terms of how we might interpret this. Another good news thing for charities, this is again looking at my relationship with charities. Over 2020, charity causes were very similar. This is kind of, there's not much change in here. It's up and down, but it's fairly flat. In 2021, the relative importance of charities, charities, and in particular compared to COVID-19, because we have been looking at that as a driver through this time series. It's gone up massively. So we've got trust growing in charities, and charities are more important. So we're seeing both of those things happening, but actually people themselves are expressing that as their need for them. So we can break that charity, that one chart down to the individual causes that are driving that. And obviously we've got health up here, and elderly, and of course disability and homelessness. And it's not a fix. I know we've got scope and shelter here with Lottie and Becky, but maybe who knows, maybe because Lottie and Becky have been scope and shelter, been using these insights, it's what's made these causes more relevant over time. Let's go with that one. We can then break this down further, again looking into specific charities and likelihood to donate. And over here we've got health charities at the right hand end. That's Cancer Research UK, obviously, and Macmillan, which will be related to the forthcoming morning. Also then, in another bit of good news, we asked people whether they've made a donation to charity in the last 7 days, and we're ahead of last year considerably. In fact, it's been good for most of this year. So we will have been seeing some good results. A bit of a dip through the summer, but it's returned over this period. And then the next bit is really kind of a bit of possibly an alarm bell, where we've got, this is a rolling average of people claiming to be giving a direct debit to charity. Last year, we saw a big drop off over that kind of autumn winter period as we ran into kind of September. We're bucking last year's trend at the moment. We're maintaining, but I think there's a risk that with all the concerns around finances and economy, we could be at risk of losing some support as well through this period, or certainly having fewer responses. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour through some of the insights. I mean, it's just a tip of the iceberg, but we've got health and COVID-19, financial worries, well-being, something around altruism and more for me and less for others, but some strengths in the relationship with charities. So we've got those are some things that are going on at the moment. Lots of change, and we're able to slice and dice these in lots of different ways. But before we go into the recommendations, we're going to run a couple of case studies run with a couple of case studies, first from Becky and then with Lottie. So thank you to them both. And over to you, Becky.
Hiya. So as I said, I'm Becky and I work in the individual giving team at Shelter. Rich is going to control slides for me because he's very kind. So to have a first bits slide. Hey. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was how the sentiments tracker has helped us understand quickly and actually quite consistently through the pandemic, the financial strain and pressure faced by supporters just at a level that we don't really have access to in how people are sort of thinking and feeling. So through the height of the pandemic, we saw that growing divide between people who were able to grow their savings and then people who were struggling more. In January at Shelter, we sent a stewardship communication as a little start to the year impact thank you. And this year we decided to add a new message for supporters who are most at risk of cancelling their regular gift. A little chance to talk, a little chance to change their giving. So within our usual communication, we included a proactive message to get in touch, to talk to us about their gift, or a form they could use to downgrade or pause gifts. The aim is to offer this sort of additional flexibility just through some really hard times and then really grow greater long-term loyalty to Shelter by taking that quick action. We just wanted to show supporters that we understood what they were going through. And one thing actually that we did with the sentiment tracker was we were able to talk to a couple of other charities to help us weigh up the risks and discuss approaches with charities considering similar comms and with access to similar information. Can I have our next slide? And then moving on from that, sort of in April 2020, well, moving back, we could see the sentiment tracker that community spirit was really, really high. That was at the time when everyone was clapping outside their windows. But as a nation, we just sort of felt a bit directionless, pretty scared, pretty uncertain. And so we sort of saw that through that time, we saw there was an extra Giving Tuesday planned for May 2020. And we thought, well, this is our chance to give to our supporters. They're feeling scared, they're feeling uncertain. Let's give them some hope, let's give them some impact. And the sort of themes we saw in the sentiment tracker led us among our first ever emergency appeal to pause just for a moment in the midst of an emergency appeal, just to pause for a moment, and on our first ever thank you day across the charity. This included running a thank you ad on social to people who had recently donated through that channel, and that was our highest performing ad on ROI. Even though the ask it contained was to share the post rather than to donate, people really, I think they felt the impact of that nice thank you. And we got a really high reach through that thank you campaign and really great engagement, including quite a lot of spontaneous upgrade when we were calling people to thank them. And then fast forward to sort of summer 2021, and through the tracker and through our partners, we heard about National Thank You Day that was coming in, had quite a lot of backing through organisations like the Scouts. I think Levi Roots was involved. It got some coverage on some breakfast news programmes. And we'd seen sort of a slow but steady, slight creep in heartening community sentiment through the spring. But we could also see we were behind where we were for that first thank you day in that space, that really heartening of the community. But that slow trend up and the publicity of the National Thank You Day felt like that was our best opportunity for where to time our second thank you day that we were hoping to run anyway. It just helped us find the best time to do it. And so that was really nice to have that positioning. Looking at the sentiment tracker, we could see the frustration and the weariness of the pandemic dragging along. So we shifted our focus in that second thank you message to only nod to hard times and not be centered on coronavirus, whereas our first thank you day, we were very much thanking people for their support through the pandemic and through those very difficult times. So we were just making sure that our message recognized how important home was to everybody, and that our supporters were there to fight for it with us, and really thanking them for that ongoing support. And then next slide, if we can have it. So how are we doing things now? I'm sorry to have a Christmas tree. I know it is the middle of September, but as I'm sure everyone else here is, we are in the midst of our Christmas planning. And actually we're trying to understanding more about our audience and using this to help inform our plans in tone and in media in the run up to that Christmas. So being part of Sentiment Tracker just helps us to look at the wider context for this Christmas, and then also specifically the relevance of shelter and understanding how people's finances might shape their Christmas plans and behavior. So we know that people are prioritizing friends and family, looking at wanting to be together, longing to be together, a bit worried about finances. But we also see that people are starting to really plan Christmas. They're starting, over the last few weeks, you've seen creeping in, people are starting to think about Christmas already. And then I think my last slide. Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of touch on the top line insights we tend to watch long term to give us quick context across a range of stakeholders, and these are the ones we tend to look at sort of week on week. But this sounds cliche, but really, really importantly, that the most important thing actually for us is almost how it all ties together rather than one particular area. It's that general picture painted week on week, month to month. We can understand how those different metrics piece together to form that overall feel for how the British public are doing, and so how they might react to us or to our communications. Whenever I ask people, how are you using the sentiment tracker, how are you guys finding it, they tend to say, well, I just keep it in the back of my mind, I just have it as my context, it's just there. We sort of look at some different things. We look at hope and fear, so the overall sort of vibe, I guess, of how people are feeling. Are they scared? Are they hopeful? Are they celebrating? Where our community indicators lead us, so looking out for ourselves, looking out for others, clapping, judging, and then particularly recently, I think redundancy and the economy has been a real focus. So through the pandemic and as we recover, the fear of redundancy, of people saying they're likely to stop donations, has really helped us understand our relative performance as a charity and to prioritise our products and our projects with not just shelter in mind and where we are as an organisation, but with how we sit in that wider context. This also included looking at comfort with face-to-face fundraising to help us time when we returned to that type of fundraising when we were able to. That's really pretty much everything from me. I think we're going to Lottie.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thanks so much, Becky. I really love the specifics, but actually that whole kind of get a rich picture and it's understanding that whole landscape and that rich picture. So it's kind of, it's like it's that reference point, isn't it? It's reference points for like any kind of comms. So thank you. Moving on to Lottie then, and thank you to Lottie.
Hello. Yes, so a little bit of information from me next about how we at Scope use insights to engage supporters. So my job at Scope is to create engaging and relevant supporter journeys for Scope supporters. And so more than ever before, it's been really important for us to have insight into where the public are at. So the tracker has been a really great tool for that, to guide both my thinking and then also the thinking of the wider organisation, particularly when things were kind of at their most critical peak last year and the year before. And it just gave us the confidence that we were in touch with how our supporters were feeling and gave us insight into what they were going through. So if we go to the next slide. So when the pandemic hit, there were a lot of scary questions suddenly and big decisions to make. Many of our staff were put on furlough and a number of our core activities came grinding to a halt. So our retail estate closed, all events were off, our face-to-face fundraising program ceased, all massive income streams for us. And so we were faced with a need to prioritise very quickly and work with the resources we did still have to try and focus on what the most important pieces of work would be during this period. And the sentiment tracker supported the decision making we made around what activities to stop, start or continue and enhance, and how we ought to shape them as we and both us and the supporters we were talking to were navigating the pandemic. We also used the tracker to gain backing from the wider organisation to focus at that time on supporter engagement and communication as a priority during this period. The The tracker helped us support our thinking about long-term growth plans as well. You know, public sentiment became an input in forecasting and setting expectations all the way up to an exec and board level. So it really helped us to set what we felt were reasonable expectations about what could be possible in such a tricky external environment. And when we look back at our reforecasted budgets now and compare them to where we are, it seems that the sentiment tracker certainly had a hand in helping us forecast with more certainty and, as it transpires, with fairly good accuracy as well. So if we go on to the next slide, when we look at supporter engagement, we put together a map of those supporter engagements that were aiming to meet supporters where they were emotionally during the ebbs and flows of their sentiment during the crisis. We were looking to be responsive to current events as they unfolded, and we were able to flex our messaging in order to stay relevant to our supporters. As a result, we ended up trying a lot of new things for us, and we recognised the importance of getting the comms right during what was a difficult period for everybody. So a few examples of the insights that we acted on. We could see from the tracker that there were really high feelings of anxiety and people felt completely out of control. One of the things that drove us to do was creating a free wellbeing and advice piece of content to try and give back to our supporters in a meaningful way for them, meeting them, as Richard always says, meeting them where they were. How did we do that? So we created what you can see there at the left-hand side, which is our Mindful Monsters content, which is aimed at children and all about mindfulness. We also drew on internal expertise. So that Mindful Monsters activity happened earlier in the pandemic, and then further on we could see that anxiety starting to peak again during the second lockdown. So once again we acted on it and shared free mental wellbeing advice, which showcased what Scope could do through one of our services, but did respond to a need that we were seeing. So within that, we created a simple list of tips for supporters on how to look after themselves and maintain their own well-being, and we shared a detailed list of where they could go for more help if they needed it. Then another insight that we acted on, people were still saying they were really keen to help others, particularly earlier in the pandemic, and they were also seeking good news amongst all the mayhem and all the negativity. We saw that especially at the beginning. There was a sense of everyone being in it together and needing to help each other. This was especially true for disabled customers, of course, who faced even greater challenges. So what we decided to do was share more frequent updates of what our supporters were helping us to achieve for disabled people, and to try and provide hope that we would all make it through. We did see demand go up for our services, and we were only able to meet this thanks to the generosity of our donors, and that is the message that we really tried to feed back, and to recognise the impact that they were having at a time where everything else in their lives felt very out of control. Another insight that we acted on were that people were worried about the economy and their personal finances. So we saw a sizable and growing number of those people were identifying as charity donors. And so we really needed to be aware of people and where they were financially. So we understood that we should reach out at that time where people felt isolated. We did a call to check in and see if supporters were okay, to say thank you, to listen to what they needed, and actually offer payment holidays or adjustments to gifts in recognition of the difficult financial period that they were experiencing. Thankfully, attrition remained stable. So when we look back, we were running at about 6% of our most established supporters had cancelled since April, which is actually lower than the 8% we'd expect in a non-recession, non-pandemic world. Whilst it's very difficult to trace this back to anything in particular, it did suggest that we managed to hit the right tone. And I think that's partly the confidence that we gained from the tracker. I am slightly aware of time. So I've got a whole section here on campaigners, which I could basically try and summarize. Essentially, we wanted to pull everybody together and act on that insight that people were still keen to help others and do something that felt tangible. We also saw that disability was a cause that was ranking really high. And so what we wanted to do was make the most of one campaign, sing from one hymn sheet to all of our supporters and go big with one simplified action that everybody could get behind. And that was our We Won't Be Forgotten campaign, which was all about making sure that disabled people weren't forgotten during the pandemic, and that was at a huge risk of happening. And we pushed that not just to our campaigners, but to a really wide audience to try and really pull everybody together. And we gained over 30,000 signatures on an open letter to the Prime Minister as one of the main actions, which was really fantastic. And we also signed on, if I could skip on to the next slide, sorry. We signed on over 2,000 new campaigners, which is an incredible achievement. We were extremely happy with that. And it's partly because although we would talk to our warm financial donors about campaigns, we hadn't gone so hard and we hadn't kept them so informed and given them the full sort of campaigning journey before. And that's something that we tried, and it really seemed to work, with open rates reaching the 50% mark in some segments and click-through rates of up to 25%, both of which are well above what we would usually expect. If we go on to the next slide. So the tracker definitely helped us unlock supporter generosity. It really played a role in helping us to connect with those supporters at the right time and ask for money in the right way. We couldn't stop asking. We needed to ask more than ever, but I think the tracker gave us the confidence to do that in a sensitive and well-timed way. So, and knowing that disability continued to be a relevant and important cause felt really reassuring. And again, we saw that people were feeling overwhelmed and needed consistent, relevant and simple messaging. So again, that ties back to the campaigning ask of the previous slides, keeping it really clear and simple, and trying to get everybody to take an action that felt tangible. And our appeals over the last year, although they varied in topic and case study, they also ultimately distilled down to this same idea of needing to support disabled people and ensure they weren't forgotten. By being that clear and relevant, and by responding to what was going on in the world and in the world of our supporters particularly, we had a great response to these emergency appeals that we ran in April and then in July. We, as you can see, we raised a huge amount more than we were expecting at a really, really tricky time. And we also brought in a lot of new supporters outside of our normal cash base who responded to a cash appeal for the first time. We had thousands more responses than we would usually see, and many of those were first-time appeal donations, despite actually not being able to include in our mail-outs a physical form because of lockdown. So we were extra excited about that because the supporters who responded were engaged enough to receive a letter and then go online or make a call to make that donation. So it felt like an extra step they took. And these and other appeals run throughout the year, as you can see on the slide, performed so well that the retention team hit their income target for last year about 5 months early, which was completely unexpected given the climate. And I think the tracker played an important part in just giving us the confidence in our messaging, our content, and the timing. The challenge we're facing now, which we know through further tracker insights, is that people's experience have diverged again, and the challenges of the pandemic are no longer so singularly felt as they were in lockdown. So we find people's focus is drawn inwards to their own personal concerns, fears, and the impact that they have felt already or are anticipating feeling thanks to the pandemic. But we do know, as you've heard today, that charities are still organisations that people are trusting and are also looking to play an important role in addressing some of the key issues that people are worrying about at the moment. So we've used this insight internally as one of the kind of persuasive reasons to roll out a really wide-reaching supporter survey of our own this month to try and understand a bit more about how people are feeling, but also give them the message that we care what they think, and we want to understand what they know about us or what they don't know, and hopefully they can continue to see us as a trusted voice because they know that we take on feedback and we listen. Little time. Let's have a look. Okay, last couple of slides. The final highlight to share is how the tracker has had informed the restarting of our face-to-face fundraising, which Becky alluded to as well at Shelter. You know, after the first lockdown, we were in a crazy place, having stopped so much fundraising activity, particularly our face-to-face fundraising operation. That was huge for us, and we're completely dependent on fundraised income. We don't get income from our services. And the vast majority of it comes from face-to-face. So pausing that had a really long-term impact for our income. So when it came round to looking to the future, it was really important for us to identify the best opportunities of how and when to restart the face-to-face fundraising programme when we could, as soon as we could, but in the right way. And the tracker helped to support conversations on this. So when we were reviewing the options, we thought about door-to-door, private site, other options for restarting, and the external tracking we received gave us the confidence to back up our thinking and helped us position our recommendation to our leadership team to restart the fundraising in front of selected scope charity shops as they began to open in June. So people had said in the tracker that they still wanted to give to charity and that they were beginning to feel more and more comfortable about charity shops as a site for face-to-face fundraising or interacting with the charity in general. And that insight led us to make the decision to place our face-to-face fundraisers back out on the street outside shops. So that's a really, really tangible example, I think, of how we use the tracker. And we were actually one of the first charities to return to face-to-face fundraising, and the campaign went well, particularly given the environment. It started small, but in total we signed up over 5,000 supporters, which equates to 5 years of fundraising at around £775,000. So it's not an insignificant thing for us. And I think that's more than enough from me. So thank you very much for listening, and apologies I've left 2 minutes.
Actually, you know what, Lottie, I could listen to that and you and Becky all day. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I love seeing an appeal with a 500% overperformance. Okay, and feeling that we might be past that. So very quickly, and just to highlight, I think we're going to need to save questions for people who can stay on past 12 because we've got just a few little bits to share with you, but we'll do what we can. So here we go. I talked about these things before. At the moment, these are the things that are really pressing for people. Health, growing priority. Money worries are growing. Well-being, optimism, suppressed and creeping down. Support's feeling more in need of support, but trust in charities is strong and growing more than before, and support is maintained, but maybe not for so long. So what can we do? Number one, check in with your supporters, make sure they're okay. Ask, ask them how they are, encourage conversation, brief your supporter care teams, make sure they know if someone's calling in for some information, ask the question, how are you doing? Are your supporter care teams up on that at the moment? Do you know? So I think this is really, really important to check in. Money worries are growing, so make sure you're ready. There are things that you can do. Make sure somebody phones in with a cancellation. What are you going to say? Have you reviewed it? What happens when a direct debit is bounces, if you like? What's your response to that? How are you going to manage it? How are you going to frame communications? How are you going to frame asks, increases for support? It's really important that you actually go through the motions and get people together, ask the questions, be consciously have plans for dealing with the fact that money worries are growing. So you've got them, fine, review them. Number 3, well-being optimism, that hope gap. Remember, we've talked about hope gap before. You need to provide some hope and inspiration. Share your visions of a future fantastic world and give people agency. Give them an easy way to help, to be a part of that. Really, really important. Your supporters feel more in need of support. Back to the first one, check in with them. And finally, trust in charities is strong and growing. So show off your achievements. That demonstration that you can make a difference it will land well at the moment, and it will reinforce when you're providing that opportunities for people to help in an easy way. 4 very quick things you could do: check in with them, make sure you're ready for the financial wobbles, provide the hope and agency, and show off your achievements. All things that you would do anyway, but they're more important, more now than ever before. So finally, I'm going to hand over to Roger very, very quickly, who's going to wrap up for us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Richard, and massive thank you to both Becky and Lottie for sharing their experiences. And thank you to everyone who's attended today. It's been fantastic to see so many and to be able to share this. I just feel it's so important to understand how people are feeling that we're the people that we're talking to. And we've got an offer for you. If you would like to take part in a 4-week trial of the public sentiment tracker, so that would consist of getting our weekly report for 4 weeks and joining us. We have a weekly briefing, which I think many people find particularly useful, because that's an opportunity to sort of rather than reading a report, to actually hear about it and talk about it and discuss it amongst the groups. Then all the details are on the screen at the moment. Drop either Richard or myself an email, go to the link that's on screen, and you can find out more information and sign up for that. But just let us know if you're interested in that. I'm really sorry we've gone 2 minutes over, and we haven't had a chance for questions on here. So if you're happy, well, we're going to do this anyway, to be perfectly honest. We will stay on, and if you've got some questions, feel free to sort of, we've got a few minutes to do that. For those of you who have to leave, I'm really sorry about that. We will be putting a recording of this on the YouTube channel. We'll let you all know what the link to that is, so you can always fast forward to the end bit, so you'll hear the questions, and you can see the questions there. So feel free to use the chat. Feel free to use there is a Q&A button on the webinar. But if I start, there was one from Helen Jackson. If I start with that first, and then I'll try and keep an eye on the other questions as well. And they're aimed more at Becky and Lottie. And it does start with a big thank you, which to reiterate again from me. It's useful to see in practice how it's worked, and obviously seeing that the hard measures that you've got from it. But Helen's question is have you also done any qualitative research to look at how your communications landed and are continuing to land alongside that, and how people might have been influenced by your communications? So that's Helen's question.
No is the short answer, but we're currently conducting a survey which we are hoping to do some qualitative follow-up activity from. I'm not 100% what the content of that follow-up will be, but it's a really interesting point. I would love to know. I mean, anecdotally, when we sent a wellbeing comms off the back of people feeling scared and isolated last year, we got sort of 1 or 2 people messaging us back directly saying, thank you so much, really appreciated this message at this time. So we've had sort of anecdotal examples, but probably not done in a kind of research way, speaking from Scope's perspective.
I think the answer from Michelle was fairly similar, actually, in that when we run our thank you days, the response from people on the phones, obviously that's a dialogue and a conversation, has always been, was really fantastic. And them saying they really appreciated us calling, particularly at that time, to say thank you, and that they understood how important home was then, and that's why they were with us. And so that was gave us that feedback. But I do think, again, yeah, it's a really interesting thing to look at specific communications. It's something we would love to do. The other thing we have is that we are part of the Chase Index, which is also conducted by Rich and Roger about loyalty, and that's helped us ask some of those questions in a more broad sort of scope way, rather than looking at specific comms, to look at loyalty and how we're meeting needs of supporters from that side.
I think that I mean, it's all about listening, isn't it? It's all about listening to people and hearing what they're saying, whether that's formal or anecdotal. I think it's collecting those insights together. Something that stood out to me in both of what you talked about was insights and sharing those. I'm trying to phrase this question in a way that isn't a very leading question, but the fact you're sharing those insights around the organisation, has it helped? We all know that I mean, all organisations have silos, or all organisations want to break down their silos. Have you found having shared insights sort of across the organisation helpful? God, that really was a leading question, wasn't it? I can't think of a way of asking that wasn't quite so leading, but if you can, yeah, I'll leave that out there.
Yes, it's wonderful.
Closed question. Oh, what a rubbish researcher.
No. But like, I think the campaign, that sounds so stupid. The campaign we ran last year, where it was a campaigning action, but we ran it broadly, is a really good example of that. It kind of broke down the silos, as you say, and encouraged collaboration, which was great. And we love those types of projects where we can work more closely and less in silo with people. And I think for me, the main thing was confidence, giving people across the organization at different levels, working on different projects, and a level of confidence that we had an insight into how public were feeling, and therefore could sort of not predict how they might respond, but certainly just pitch it right.
We're also a yes. I think having that sort of common hymn sheet that doesn't look at this type of supporter or that type of supporter, but looks at the public, gives everyone sort of a common basis of understanding to work from when building up plans or working across teams, which we obviously try and do a lot. I think everyone does, and so that's where it's really helped us form that basis, really.
Great, thank you. Possibly one last question then. I'll keep an eye on if there's anything else coming through. I guess, I mean, you've both been involved a lot through. I know, Lottie, you sort of joined because as Sam left, you joined. But actually, I'll start with Richard. But Becky and Lottie, if you want to add anything, what do you think is the biggest thing that you've learned from tracking people every week and how they're feeling and what they're prioritizing and what's important to them?
Well, massive question, Roger.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well,
it's not a leading closed question, which I'm pleased about.
Another couple of hours maybe we need. So I think we know intuitively that how, you know, and it's like, it's the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, isn't it? That, yeah, what you think and feel impacts and influences how you behave and what you do. So we know that intuitively to be true and based on science. But I think when it comes to sort of your day-to-day life and how the stuff out there affects how you feel, and then how then goes on to affect the specific things you do with charities, I think we've really learned that actually some of those factors can influence how altruistic and how empathy you are, and then that has a direct impact on your charitable giving. So we saw it all the way through last year, where that kind of solidarity dropped away, and then we saw that kind of empathy fall away, and people started focusing in on themselves, and we did start to see some of those charitable indicators drop away as well. So we started to see that happen, and I think that was all based around COVID. Now that was a really good kind of proving ground, if you like, because since then, and I don't know if you've seen some of the articles that we've put out about the Paralympics, about Love Island, about other things that are happening in the news that also do influence where people are placing their priorities, how they're feeling, how that then goes on to influence their empathy, their altruism, which then goes on to influence specific parts of their charitability. And I'm not necessarily saying that we know everything, far from it, but and we're constantly learning as we're moving forwards. But I think the key thing is that we are actually learning a lot about the things that make a difference to how people feel and how people behave. And as Roger said earlier on, each week we're learning new things and we're seeing new things, and it's providing really kind of quite sharp and precise insights to help charities to land comms and resonate and get that cut through when attention is so difficult to capture at the best of times. So I think it's that journey, I think, Roger, really. It's like getting the scientific evidence, if you like, that these feelings affect these behaviors, and then how we can translate that into real tangible advice and insights.
Brilliant. Lottie, Becky, yeah, go for it.
I think mine's actually probably quite similar to Richard's in that, I guess, just being, maybe surprised is the wrong word, but looking at quite how swayable we are as a group, whether we're focusing internally on our friends, family, our home lives, or whether we're facing externally, looking out into the world and looking at bigger picture issues, and quite how much that has been swayed and affected by not just lockdowns, but all sorts of other bits of information that come through that news cycle, and which bits it is that are causing that volatility between whether we're close to home or looking sort of out further.
I have a kind of a hard-hitting thing that we've learned, which is that a hard lesson for us, I suppose, around even though a cause like disability can be tracking high and as a priority for people, that doesn't automatically mean anything about how likely people are to donate to your charity, even if you are directly associated with that cause. And it sort of just highlights how hard what we do is as a sector. I'm not talking about me particularly, that even if the public are really behind a certain cause, there's a lot of work you have to still do to connect that with your own charity. And I think for Scope, that's meant taking a long, hard look at our brand and our brand presence, and asking some hard questions internally about how we can better link up to disability as a cause, which is still continues to track as a kind of important issue for people. So that's been interesting.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing the insights and your experiences this morning. Lottie, what a note to finish on, that what we do is hard. It is hard trying to reach people when there's so much going on in their lives and so many other priorities. And I think we sometimes forget that we are not the most important thing in our supporters' lives. And hopefully this can be a little bit of a reminder to that. What we do is hard. Hopefully this morning has made it a little bit easier for all of you. Delighted to see so many, and so many have stayed on as well for an additional 15 minutes. So thank you for that, and apologies for running over. Yeah, we're tremendous gratitude for joining us today. Thank you again, Richard, and particularly Becky and Lottie again. And we look forward to seeing you in a future webinar, and hopefully some of you will be interested in the trial, and we'll see you then too. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Lottie. Thank you, everybody.